So, we all know this bit of music. It's probably one of the most famous tunes in history of Western classical music. But why does it work so well? How is it that everybody can memorize it and instantly recognize its beauty? Well, I hope to demystify some of that by the end of this video. Moreover, I will break down the entire first movement in more or less 4 different ways. First, a form analysis. Second, a harmonic analysis. Thirdly, and this will be the main focus, a melodic and motivic analysis. And in addition, I will also briefly mention some orchestration features. I assume that most of you have notions of sonata structure, form and harmonic analysis. If not, it is still possible to follow along, but I advise you to broaden your knowledge in these areas first. First, we will have a listen together with a slideshow that includes the form and harmonic analysis. Again, please download and print the score so you have a better overview than just a compact slideshow. I'll give the download link in the description below. I should mention that I've edited the recording, that is, I've left out the repetition of the exposition. This is just for demonstrational purposes. The recording we will be listening to is from the Stewart Gardner Museum, Boston, that I found on the school website called Muse Open. Most of the recordings are licensed under Creative Commons, so thank you for that. Before we start with the melodic breakdown, I want you to be aware of something important related to the harmony, namely the length of the harmonic functions. You will see that the length varies from 1 to 2 to even 4 bars and beyond. Likewise in the opposite way, half a measure and even quarter of a measure. Please take notice when this happens. For example, at the end of phrases or sections, you will often see that the harmonic successions speed up. Okay, let's begin with the famous introduction theme. I will highlight the different themes in colors so that it's easier to keep track of them. So, what can we say about this theme? What are its distinct features? According to Wikipedia, this is a Mannheim rocket theme. You can check the Wikipedia page on the Mannheim school for some extra info. Essentially what it comes down to is a broken chord in a rapid descent. And I guess that's kind of what's happening here. What else? All instruments play in unison over the different octaves, which was quite novel for that time. This effect amplifies the sound, it gives it that additional bright color that will stand out in comparison to the other themes. The theme itself can be viewed as two phrases, a question and an answer. The question ascends and the kind of mirror image answer descends to end on a half cadence. You can view the entire answer as a dominant or as a scale degree 2 followed by a dominant. Likewise for the question, the end can also be analyzed as the dominant. The intervals used are open but very singable. We have a characteristic and very singable fourth over here. At the end of the answer we have a descending fifth from the note A to D. So we have G to D and then A to D. The rhythm here is very clever. The G to D motive is repeated and then accelerated. Thus, Mozart uses a single idea and then accelerates it. Repetition is a very cool tool to make ideas accessible. The overall attractiveness of this melody is attributed to the right balance and combination of some of the effectors that I just mentioned. Now that Mozart has gotten your attention, it's time to introduce the real first theme. I will call it the first theme part A. It contrasts heavily with the rocket theme from before. The melody is more closed, it moves primarily in stepwise motion instead of the skips that we had before. The overall color changes instantly, due to a different orchestration in the accompaniment. That is, a propelling motion due to rapid repetitive notes. The rhythm has changed as well. We now have a very prominent accent on the second beat. Also, as we often see with Mozart, his use of well-placed anticipations and other repeated notes. Although the notes are ornamented, you must be able to see the logical lines of this melody. Here, G, F sharp, G, and then again F sharp. Now the G, F sharp and G is repeated in an accelerated rhythm. That is the same idea used with the introductory theme. We are near the end of the phrase, and the chords start to become more abundant. Also notice the brief viola intermezzo. Last logical line is A, B, C, and then D. Mozart ends the phrase on a first inversion. We have not yet modulated, so the next theme is actually still part of the first one. I will call it part B of the first theme. Once again we have a new rhythm, this time a very simple one. Look at the movement, upward motion and then downward motion. Here is an imitation of voices. You can once again see a very logical series of notes, you just have to look through the ornaments and the repetitions. The harmonic functions now change half a beat, at the end a quarter a beat. The phrase is then repeated and Mozart uses more 8 notes to alter the melody and to fasten up the pace. The phrase only is 3 measures long now, the cadence is omitted and we slide into the transition on a pedal point. I cannot repeat it enough, sorry, but just look at the melodic line once again. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and then a first note not related to our original tonal center, namely C sharp. This is an indication there might be a modulation, and indeed there is a pivot modulation to the dominant key of D major. Mozart now uses the head of the introductory theme, but harmonizes it in D major. Notice that he now quickly accelerates the theme in a dotted figure. As if it were not enough, he then introduces one of his most beloved tools, syncopation. The transition ends with a half cadence. So, a quick summary. 4 bars intro theme, 6 bars first theme part A, then 4 plus 3 bars first theme part B, and 10 bars of transition. That makes a total of 27 measures of comprehensible, accessible and logical ideas. Pretty skillful, right? The second part of the exposition begins with the second theme. Let's compare it to the first theme. Here are some differences. The introduction of a triplet rhythm, non-legato melody, though this can be traced back to measure 14, more dense harmonic bass, and the use of secondary dominance. Let's compare these cells. A question and answer structure. The tail is altered from the individual notes to a resolution on a second inversion cadential dominant chord. The melody then gets a new destination in the second violin, while the first violin plays an obstinate A which functions as a pedal tone. We call it an inverted pedal point because it is not present in the bass. Further, the second theme gets an extension, a new melodic and rhythmic line is then introduced. This is a motivic connection that is linked to the first theme part A. Only this time, these notes function as a changing note on a strong beat. Still, everything is centered around that note A, the dominant note of D major. Mozart now uses a small sequence that starts in the middle of a measure. The melody is motivically connected to the triplet motive from part A. Notice B, A, G, and then A, G, F sharp, and a fourth skip from F sharp to B. The whole thing is then repeated, preceding the last part of the exposition, the codetta. This codetta is connected to the first theme part A, specifically measure 9. Mozart also really lets you know that things are about to change because the first part is again orchestrated in unison. I briefly want to discuss the second to last bar here. The bass resembles the melody of the first theme part B, and this rhythmic cell can be found in our second theme part B. We have now come to the point where composers use motivic ideas and transform them into new ideas. It is called the development section. As this is incidental light and night music, there is no real necessity for a lengthy or heavy development. But Mozart wouldn't be Mozart if he didn't fool with you around just for a little bit, right? So yeah, that is what he does. He starts innocent with a harmonization of the introductory theme in D major. But it sort of weirdly ends on a secondary dominant of scale degree 2. That does not really resolve. However, the B is the leading tone of C, which gives us a bit direction. The second theme part B is now used and harmonized in the key of C major. The melody and harmony is altered to modulate to the related key of A minor, by this unusual modulation. More alterations and tension building leads us to this key dissonant chord in the key of G minor. Let's figure out what chord is at play. We have an E flat, G, B flat and a C sharp. The E flat and C sharp both move outwards to D. Remember that D is the dominant of our home key G major, but we are now actually in G minor. Whenever you see such a movement and the interval of an augmented sixth, E flat to C sharp, you should immediately think of an augmented sixth chord. In this case we have a German one. There is also a French and an Italian augmented sixth. I'll put a link down below with some extra info on this. The rhythmic pattern of the second theme, part B, is preserved but transformed in a new melody/sequence. And so has its orchestration, the instruments in unison once again. The sequence extends to a chromatic line with a prolonged climax on the note D. The dominant of G minor is equally the dominant of G major. This way, Mozart connects to the re-exposition. In the re-exposition, the material of the exposition is repeated and reformulated. The main difference with the exposition is the second theme harmonized in the key of G major. Mozart establishes this by using a pedal point on D instead of A. This time there are no syncopations. The second theme is then harmonized in the key of G major. So, I think we have discussed the most important features. I'd like to just take you briefly to measure 120. The high E here is the highest note of this movement. To give it an extra punch, Mozart harmonizes it as a remote chord, namely the secondary dominant of scale degree 2. Dissonance and/or tension always works well on climaxes. The beginning of the coda is similar to that of our previous discussed codetta. To end, Mozart uses a spicy chromatic descending line. The C sharp is a chromatic passing tone that gives a nice color. The C is a passing tone on a strong beat. The first cell is then repeated, and in the second cell the chromatic descending line is transformed in an upward diatonic line. E and F sharp are both passing tones. The final pedal point is a restatement of the introductory theme. It is featured but transformed. Also, notice the dominant 7th here and here. Mozart then concludes by using a dotted figure that gives the ending a majestic feel. So that's it. I sincerely hope that you've got some sort of better grip on understanding and appreciating this fantastic gem of classical music repertoire. Please understand that I cannot cover everything. That would take us too far away from the main ideas of this work. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.